Welcome to the fourth edition, I believe this would be when it debuts, of KJ's Corner. I'm your host, KJ. I'm a senior sales engineer. I was originally a technical enablement lead. Literally, the last time I did one of these podcasts, UiPath couldn't get enough of me on the sales engineering side, so they pulled me back in. And with me, I have a dear friend of mine who I have been going back and forth, honestly, for like a month now, trying to get some time because we are both parents, and we'll talk about that. But this is Priya. She's a 4-time UiPath MVP. I'll let her get into that in a minute. Most valuable professional. She is an RPA solution architect, a Scrum Master, which I think is pretty awesome. But right now, as you can tell by her title, she is an automation freelancer, but she is a full-time mother, which we will get into at the end. And with that, Priya, just want to introduce you. How are you? I know we talked a little bit, but how are you doing? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. I mean, it's a great start for your show, I guess. So I would say it's it's a fantastic weekend, like, coming back from a long weekend. So it's a great start. So a little bit about myself. I've been a RPA solution architect for
Hmm.
the past 5 years, or more than 5 years, a little over.
Probably
And
something like that. Yeah.
now I'm just taking a little break.
Hmm.
As you mentioned, I'm a new mom, so I still don't want to give up my passion for automation. So what I do is like I try to be a part of the community,
Hmm.
take up like chapter. I run the Houston chapter. So if you're ever
Yep.
into like
Saw you posted on that. Yep.
things,
Studio X session. You led that. How'd that go? Just curious. I
oh,
mean,
that
now
was
I'm just asking
fantastic.
myself, but sure.
So
Cool.
it was
Awesome.
more of a refresher for myself and the audience. So like I gotta show them the new templates. So it's always like more interesting. I love technology in general.
Sure.
So just learning is like a very basic thing that I want to like keep learning every day.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I feel like very rusty. like
Sure. No, I get that. That's, hey, for people listening to that, think about that, right? Consistently learning, trying to push yourself, trying to do it. Yeah.
absolutely, be it like anything, be it not just technology, even
Sure.
motherhood. That's a whole different arena where I had to
Oh,
learn
yeah.
so many things.
I mean, I'm not a mother, but like I can only, I mean,
I mean, being parents by
yes,
themselves,
yes,
like
yes,
it
yes,
comes
yes.
with its own task. So, like within technology, like as you know, with the boom of AI and now
Hmm.
with ChatGPT and all that, like there's every day there's at least like 40 different things to learn, and there's
Oh,
not
yeah.
enough time. So, like
No, not at all.
you're never gonna master everything. So at least get to learn like what you can. So that's what I'm trying to do. With the minimum amount of time that I get, I try
Hmm.
to learn as much as I can and also like give back to the community, because one way that like I see myself growing is that like only if I teach I know that like I'm learning well.
Hmm.
Because like when I go back and try to do a session on something, that's when like I'm trying to find answers before assuming that people will ask these questions.
Sure,
So
sure.
that truly helps me out. So if anybody's out there trying to learn something, and if you're trying to master a skill, I would say like try to teach it to somebody, and
Wow,
that'll
I don't even have to tee you up for that. That's great. I mean, but that's a great piece of advice, though, and I think it's for anyone. And and this is part of the breaking into technology. I didn't necessarily intro that. I just said KJ's Corner. It's the breaking into technology community, and a lot of people are looking for ways to do that. And I think that's probably a really good way to enforce technical concepts, right? Is if I
yeah.
don't necessarily know it myself and I can't educate someone, how am I possibly going to be an expert in it, right? So I totally think that's awesome. So let's flip the script a little bit because I want to tie it back to. So you said we can't learn everything. I agree with that. So sometimes we fall into a specific focus. So you are an automation freelancer, but as you and I both know, you're a UiPath MVP. I know you're not using just our tool, and I know you know others. But can you explain a little bit more about either low code or robotic process automation for people who might not necessarily be aware? I can explain it, obviously, but I'm biased because I work at UiPath. So I'd love to hear it from your perspective as well. What that means and what that entails.
So this is funny. Like, so every time I talk about RPA, or when I
Hmm.
introduce myself to anybody in a family gathering, or like in a whole new like networking event,
Hmm.
like when I say like robotic process automation, people always think like I built like humanoid robots that
Right.
I'm like
I get that
wiring
too. Yep.
things and like
Yep.
working with IoT
Yep.
type of stuff. So then I have to clarify, give them the imagination, saying like, hey, I built like software robots that basically mimic your actions. So be it like you're like a business owner, like an accountant, or whatever that you do on a daily basis, like you all interact with computer, like either using your keyboard, you're
Hmm.
reading off of the screen, or using the mouse clicks. So imagine like if you're doing that as a tedious process on a day-to-day basis, and if you had your own assistant to do that job for you, that is the software robot that I built. So if
Yep.
you can define those rules and like tell me what exactly you do, I can build that out for you so that like you
I
can,
can too, right?
you see, it's simple as that. So once I start explaining people that what software robots are, then people get interested. So this is more like, a macro. So then
Oh,
some
I hear
people
that
have
all
like
the
a little
time.
bit of
Yeah.
technical
Yeah.
expertise
Yep.
and they come back with this macro. I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, like it's very similar. I would say like, somewhat similar, just that macros are like, confined to like one application or so.
Correct. Correct.
But with UiPath, you get the opportunity to interact with multiple applications, like either front end or in the back
Mhm.
end using APIs.
Yep.
And now you can build like, using ChatGPT, you can have like conversations. You can apply like any of the AI models. Either you bring your own AI model or you can take the out of the box models that UiPath offers.
Hmm.
So it's pretty easy to learn
Hmm.
and it's
And
for
I'd say
free.
that, and I did not pay Priya, by the way, to say any of that. She is a most valuable professional. We'll talk about that probably as we get more to the machine automation part of your career. But and also too, like while Priya did mention UiPath, there are plenty of other tools that also offer these capabilities
Yeah.
as well. We just so happen to be well versed with this tool. So what I will always advocate is like if you're looking to learn a little bit more about what we have, obviously I have my crash course. I've presented that 800 billion times. But in all seriousness, low code tooling is out there, and there's a lot of things. I hear Zapier all the time, Workato. I'm trying to think of another one. Zendesk. Oh my God, Downworks are one, right? Like bunch of different options, right? That you have that all kind of fit into this bubble. We just happen to be the number one in market share, which I can quite glad to say. But let's go back to basics. So you weren't always a robotic process automation developer. Looks like you, if I look at your education specifically, looks like your Bachelor of Engineering at SKR from 2007 to 2011. So not to
Yeah.
try and age you or anything, but that's how old you are. And then you started your career, looks like in May of 2012 at Tech Mahindra, and you were there for 5.5 years. So I'd love to hear what was it that gave you the opportunity to work at TechM, and what did you do? What was that first project? Like, what was the first? I guess really, what was the first job you had as your start of a quote unquote software engineer or an engineering professional? Would love to hear that.
And KJ, you might even love this better. So I'm gonna take you back to my college days. So that'll
Yes,
give you
let's
like
go.
even
Cool.
more
Yep.
like better
Sign up.
perspective
Yep. Let's do it.
from where I come from. So I did my college in India, in Chennai. So like I did my bachelor's of engineering in computer science. So that was purely by choice. I I come from a family of like civil engineer. My dad's a civil engineer, and he wanted me to get in there, but like I just had this love for computers. I don't know why. It was just this
Same.
gravitating, force that was pulling me in.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do computer science, and I know like I will land a job. But once I landed my education, what happened was like I discovered that there are opportunities for me to go out into other colleges, like technical events where I can do debugging. So they had like competitions like debugging
Sure.
or
Yep.
presenting papers. So
Hmm.
once I discovered it was more like a game to me, and I fell in love with the
Okay.
debugging part. So I was like, oh my God, like you can do this for fun and win money. Like, I mean, like they give cash.
I mean, at the time, yeah. Like,
So
yeah.
at the time I was like, oh my God, this is so much fun. Like you're learning at some point, but also like you're enjoying this. So I
Mhm.
felt that like, like that excitement of like, like having a timed event where you're like
Mhm.
actually like participating in competitions. And this is out of my comfort zone because this was not in my own college. So I was like traveling to different areas around my college,
Mhm.
and that was like so much fun. And like you get to do this with your friends, you can team up. So that built that like, the team spirit and come out of my own comfort zone. And that also helped me like with a lot of networking. So every time I go to one of these
Huge.
conferences, I get to hear like, like the keynote speakers or the guests that come over, and when they speak about technology, and there's so much options out there.
Mm,
So
yeah.
it actually like opened my mind. I'm like, okay, so if I do computer science, I just don't have to be like, as a developer. I can be a tester, I could be like a BA. So like it gave me that choice to see like, oh, there are different roles.
Mhm.
So that kind of awareness, it came up. And one thing that I really like, stick to is like I always try to ask questions, even though it might be like the silliest one. Like, the whole room can be
I
quiet.
remember when I first
I
met you,
can
you
be
had a lot
like,
of questions to
why?
ask.
I
Yeah,
can
like I remember
quiet.
that. Yeah.
Like, I'm like, okay, so that's one thing that I really love is like asking questions. It's just like curious, like it can be silly, Or like I just want to know like what exactly is that you're trying to convey. Like I
Mhm.
probably got your message, but like I want to understand it better. And that's the only reason that I ask questions, to know like what is your message. So that truly like helped me in a way when it comes to networking, because with people, when you meet like different types of people, you want to know like what is the area that brought them to that space. So
Sure.
that's where like I want
What
to
I'm
know like
doing
how do they
literally
get
with you
there,
right now.
right?
Like I'm doing that with you. I want to hear what got you to the dance, right? So yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So the networking is an important part to like like improve my knowledge in terms of like understanding that there's a larger space here. So that really helped me out, and that's how like I was able to like like get out of my comfort zone.
Hmm.
And like as India is like very largely populated,
Hmm.
so every year there's like tons of engineering students that graduate. So I had to find a skill to like make myself stand out, which is where like all these like different competitions came into play. And that's how like like you get to know, I mean like that's how like your head of the department in the computer science, like he
Yep.
got to know me, the dean got to know me, and he said like, okay, he gave me some guidance as well. So like he was like, like when you try to like put some effort, then like the universe also brings some people to help you
Huge.
out.
Yep.
So I believe
Yep.
in that.
Sure. I
And
mean, yeah.
so that truly like worked in my case, like where like the dean was giving me a little bit of advice, and like the head of the department, the various staff that were in my college also like helped out to say like, hey, you can do these courses, and like you can be here, you can do that. So like that was a lot of guidance that I did get, and I used it for my benefit. And
I
when you
mean, who
study in
wouldn't?
India,
Like, if you know it's presented to you, and I just want to take a quick side note is like every single theme of everyone I ever interview, and like it's always networking is usually what got us somewhere to start. And what you're alluding to is regardless of this just happened to be back in school, but you chose very prominent individuals to take guidance, seek, advice from, and so on and so forth. And that's going to turn in the favor of, oh, I remember Priya talking about that. And then they're going to help you in return. So I would say to anyone listening to this, there are people in your organizations probably right now that are higher that you might be saying from like a political or bureaucratic perspective, like, oh, it's very difficult. Just reach out, find a reason to connect with
yeah.
them, and I guarantee it's going to work out. Just want to take that sidebar because like you hit that right out of the gate, and that's clearly why you were successful. But it's more like that's what this is for people who are trying to figure out how do I do that. So continue. Sorry.
No, no, that's okay. I mean, like, that is what we want. Like, we need to, like, one thing I would add though is that, like,
Go ahead.
like, as we are all, like, as human beings evolve, I would say, like, not everybody is, like, born talented. I would say,
Correct.
like, every
Yes.
skill can be, like, developed if you practice.
Yes.
So for me, like, one thing was that, like, I know, like, I might be talented, but I just don't know what it is in. So for me, even to find out, like, you've got to be a good listener to like hear other people's feedback, or like it could be criticism. And in this case, like I took it as a guidance, like when people, like even my staff or like my peers, when they give feedback, like I take it seriously and like take it and review it back, because that's what is going to like help me grow.
Hmm.
And in this
Yeah.
case, like it truly worked out. And one thing that you probably don't know is that like when you study in India, the
Yeah. I don't
education
know that.
the education system offers you, like when you right before you graduate, you're supposed to like build your aptitude into like your soft skills and your logical
Hmm.
thinking, your lateral thinking, and so there's like a separate books and courses that you have to
Oh
do
wow.
in order to crack these interviews. So for you to like get a job, like you need to be able to like first crack this first step of the interview. So like everybody literally like practices this aptitude test.
Wow. So
So
you're saying everyone interesting because I know that some specialized colleges. So like I took, even though I was in the IT management school, like I took presentational speaking, I took organizational culture, I took like all of these things that would have prepped me for that. But that's it. So you're saying everyone across the board does that? That's awesome.
if you're in engineering, so it depends.
Fair
So
enough.
you've
Okay.
got to
Sure.
be in the
Sure.
engineering schools.
Okay.
But if you're like studying within like arts or like the finance side, like you may not get that.
Okay.
But if you're within like engineering, you have to like learn this critical thinking, the problem solving, the lateral thinking, all those things.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, because I mean, and I also think about too the people who are usually leading like really big projects or people who are like kind of running things. a good majority of them have engineering backgrounds, right? And I think it's because we know how to think critically,
Yeah,
but those soft skills are able to allow us to effectively communicate, which, hey, not for nothing, we're both sitting on this podcast right now. So like you get the idea, but it's really cool to know that there's an emphasis of that. Especially as and correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's probably like an emphasis to do it, obviously in whatever the native tongue would be in English, I would assume, right? So you're
it
probably
is
also
in
dealing with that as
English.
well,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's what I mean is like, and sometimes we're very blessed in the States, and sometimes we forget that sometimes. Like, I mean, I know one and maybe a half languages. Like, I know Spanish, but to say I can sit here and speak it, no way, right? So it's, we count our blessings on that, but that's really awesome that SKR did that. That's cool. Like, I think that's actually a really awesome thing that you got. I just wanted to kind of say, like, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, like looking back, I would say like every step of the way, every choice that I made, I feel like it's a blessing. I'm glad
Sure.
that I did what I did because like I'm here right now.
Yeah, for sure. And that led you to, I would assume, so you cracked the interview. So do you interview at TechM over there, or did you go over
Yes.
here? How
So
did that?
that's
Okay.
where I was getting to. So like when I
Oh, sorry.
did all those
Beat you to it. My
courses,
bad.
no worries. I mean, like all those courses like help me. So what they do is like they bring like companies into the college.
Yep.
So there are like campus interviews that
Yep.
happen. So
Hmm.
like using one of those interviews, I did crack the TechM interview, and that's how like there were like four different rounds. And once you graduate, like they put you through a training. So within TechM,
Mm,
once you join, you have to go through a certain training. So they assign you technology, like the domain
mm,
which you're going to be in.
okay.
So lucky for me, I've always been a Microsoft girl, and I got the .NET.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, now this makes perfect sense. Got it. Okay.
So you see, the domino effect kind of started there,
Yes.
because like there could have been, I would have been in a different world if I was put in Java, but like luckily, like thank God.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah. Good for you. But okay. So you had so Microsoft, was it just Microsoft, like just .NET in
It
general,
was
or what was
pure
it?
.NET. So it was
Okay.
like the
Okay.
basics, like you learn the OOPS concepts, like you learn
Hmm.
like pretty much .NET, pure .NET.
Sure. And
And
for those of you who are just listening and being like .NET, what is that? It's a programming language. So when you search .NET, Microsoft's written on like Microsoft written on this stuff, right? So like .NET is like you'll hear like, oh, if I want to learn a low code tool, what's a good one? It's like learn .NET. This is why, because the concepts are very, very similar. So just helping y'all out if you're going to look and explore that. So continue. Sorry.
yeah, I mean, like the concepts are pretty much the same, whether it's .NET or Java. Like
Right.
the object-oriented programming, that's what
Hmm.
is like your foundation. So if you're trying to build your skill, I would say like first learn this object-oriented programming,
Yeah.
like how that is, and also like go back to data structures and algorithms,
Hmm.
because that'll truly like help you like solve a lot more
It
problems
will.
if we
That's
know about
true.
like data
That's
structures.
very true. People are like, how do you know all this? I'm like, well, I learned how to be a developer. Like, just because I don't do it now doesn't mean I didn't learn the basic
Exactly.
concepts. And what you're alluding to is foundation, right? If you're going to go to Calc 2, you should probably know the foundations of calculus. You should probably understand a derivative, right? So it's the same concept of compounding on that. And then I would say once you've learned them all, you're obviously just going to be more experienced in one versus the other. So cool. No, it's a good point.
That's true. And like from there on, like I started. So once I graduated from that 3 month training, like I kind of like landed in the top three from the top three scorers in the class. So
Nice. Good for you. Nice.
I landed a good project. So like again, like there's a selection process that goes through, and I landed a really good client here in the US. It was an oil and
Okay.
gas major. And from there, like I was assigned like into a team that had like
Hmm.
40 people or so.
Okay.
And good for me, like my very first project, I was like loaned into a different team where I had to do like data modeling, and like I had to build like SSAS reports and like packages
Okay.
and a lot of ETL work. And
Hmm.
that was just like a very little, like, dipping your toe in. But once I finished that, like then I went and did a Microsoft certification to prove to my boss, oh, Maverick's there.
He's just
And
looking. He's fine.
he's like peeping, like, oh,
He's
hi.
like, hey, what's up?
So then I went and did this Microsoft certification to prove to my, like, the peers, letting them know that I'm serious about this work.
Hmm.
And then they were like able to see, like, okay, she's committed, so like we'll take her into a different project. So then I was assigned the very first project with my project manager, which nobody like really gets. So that was an opportunity. I felt like it truly like changed my perspective, because there was a lot of learning. So like when you're teamed up with one of the best people around, like best people around you, that's when like you tend to like absorb, like a
Mm-hmm.
lot more of their qualities and like learn from them. So in this case, I'm like truly lucky for my boss Sai. He was like so nice that he would explain like every single thing, and he was a project manager, remember. He's not like a just a developer, so he was like
Mm-hmm.
managing like 40 people here
I mean,
and
yeah.
all different projects. So I was like lucky to be there, and I learned the very first thing was like entity framework. And I'm like, wow, that. And back in those days, that was the biggest buzzword, just like ChatGPT
Yeah,
is now.
yeah.
Entity
Yeah, let
framework.
me I'm even gonna search that right now, entity framework. Man, I haven't seen that in a minute. All right, here we go,
Yeah,
entity
I will never
framework
forget
core.
the just like how we
I
call
just showed
YAML
up
files.
interview questions, like what? And you'll see it's on Microsoft Learn. It's right there. Yeah, tutorials. Wow, this is crazy. Someone's
Yeah,
got a whole GitHub on this. This is
that's a very big
nuts.
deal, because like
Yeah.
across apart from the standard, the SDLC development, apart from the standard waterfall type, like what this does is like like it separates the data layer. So I'm
Mhm.
going too much technical into
No,
this.
it's no. This is no. It's you're actually not, because it's. I think what we're getting down to, and I'll pull you back. Don't worry. Is
Okay.
what you're showcasing here to where you're at now is you learned so much technology that you didn't necessarily pursue. I mean, you're obviously working a tech role. You obviously help people develop automations. But I would argue, because you have so much knowledge and foundational knowledge around developer
Yeah.
concepts, it makes you a better functional analyst as a result, which is why you're able to be successful in your career. Right. So I don't think you're going too deep at all. I mean, maybe we're going down a rabbit hole, but I think that this was good for people to hear, because it's like you're just compounding on it. It's kind of when like you become like a fan of something. You start to
Yeah.
learn the meta of it, right? You're getting into meta concepts. Like people can learn how to build a basic automation. People can learn how to build a basic Java program. But what you're talking about is now I can make this thing robust, and you understand how to do that now.
Yeah.
So even if you're not the person to do it, you can now communicate effectively to someone who will, right? And I think that's super, super important for anyone working in technology to understand. Sometimes it does make sense to dig deep, because you might realize, "Oh, I kind of like this stuff," right? And if you do, go for it. And sometimes you just got to take the first step. So I thought it was fine. I have no problem with you going down the rabbit hole at all.
Yeah,
But
and I would say like
yeah,
I would
yeah, go ahead.
agree with you on this. Like, like when you say like, foundations is more important, I would definitely agree, because like you really need to like, like grow your roots into there.
Hmm.
Because like only then like you'll be able to understand concepts even better. Because like if you don't understand the concepts like conceptually, you're not going to be able to put it down practically.
Right,
So
right.
that's the hard part. So even though
Hmm.
there's a lot of like low code, like AI that can build the code for you, I would say like try to understand. Because like once you like let AI do the job for you, like in terms of coding, just in terms of coding, I want to clarify
Okay.
that if you let it write the code for you and you don't understand, and you deliver the code and you let it run, and then you're into a Skynet situation that like you're just letting AI run your code for
You're
you.
letting it run because you're
And
not prompting. Yeah, yeah,
so you
yes.
literally don't know what the code does. So that is like so questionable. So I would say like learn your concepts, like very basic things. Even though if it's low code, just know like, like for people that are new to technology and trying to do
Hmm.
like any low code, like even with UiPath, we have Studio X, like just learn like what is variables, like what is abstraction, like what is, like what is data tables. So those are
Yeah, like
like
what are
pretty
they?
basic
Yeah,
things, right? So I
but
would
the
say like
yeah.
encourage people to like learn, like spend time.
Sure, sure. And on that, I think it's a good segue into. So you did this at Tech Mahindra. If you don't know what Tech Mahindra is, look them up. You'll probably figure out. We're trying to be like, what do they do? They do everything, right?
Yeah, they're a big,
But
large service
yeah,
provider, by
right.
the way. Like, so
Yes.
that's how like I got my first opportunity to
Hmm.
be here in the US. So like I got my client, and then like when I wanted to switch jobs, so I'm gonna take you through this
Go
switching.
for it. You're, I mean, I can just sit back and relax. I can just, but it's good, yeah, because eventually all of those skills led you to, you know what? I think I could do this at a smaller place and be a real legitimate technical consultant here, which is, I think that's
Hmm.
what you've been doing ever since, right?
Yeah, I mean, Tech Mahindra gave me the opportunity to do like multiple roles. So
Hmm.
even though like I started off as like a .NET developer, I still like, like I took that experience, and in my very next project within Tech Mahindra, like I stayed there for like 6 years. So
Sure.
like during that period of time, like I took as many opportunities as I can. And in that case, like I even built like a whole system that using the MVC, and that is like model view controller. That's
Hmm.
another buzzword that was
Yep.
happening.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I
Yep.
tried to step into every buzzword that was trending during
I
that
mean, it's
time.
not a bad idea.
And if my clients wanted to build it, and I did a project, so like
Hmm.
I had like three member team that we were managing. And when I managed that team, that actually like helped me in the project management skills as well. So that's where like my first manager's like experience came into play. And then I was able to like, in the following project, I also like was able to experience a business analyst. So I got to
Hmm.
play like all these different roles. And in the following one, I did the infrastructure role, and
Yep.
also like, the support. So like I gotta
Oh
play
well,
like
that's why you're an
all these
MVP,
different
because you
hats.
literally know everything. Duh. Like, yeah, it was, makes sense.
And when I went into the infrastructure, that's where like I started learning about automation.
Hmm.
So I built my first PowerShell script, and I was like, oh man, this is awesome. Like
That
I
was
can do
probably
like
fun.
150 steps with just like one
With
script.
just a click. Yep.
Yeah.
Because all of those steps were just like you had mentioned in the beginning when you were describing robotic process automation. They're actions, they're activities, they're
Yeah.
steps, right? Yeah. Oh,
So that truly like brought me curious. So that's when like I hit my saturation point, and I thought like I needed some more challenges. So I needed like a more challenging role. And then I
hmm.
started looking out for jobs, and like that's when like I hit this one interview that actually asked me like, hey, do you know like UiPath or PA? I was like, can you just spell it for me? Like I'll just like, go look it up.
I'll
So
literally Google it while oh my, we operate so similar. That's so funny. Someone like so like I'll be on demos and people are like, have you heard of this? I'm like, no. And I will search it while my screen's showing and be like, what is that? Like what? Yeah, that's so funny. Anyway,
So
continue.
that's how I landed with UiPath. And I'm like, okay, that's how
Okay.
I heard about UiPath. And like, I got to the interview like with 3 days of prep with just Googling about UiPath. I haven't
Hmm.
signed up for anything, just prep my like, basic knowledge on like what's RPA, and just went there. And they just wanted to know like if you've got this problem solving, critical thinking. That's all they were
Look
looking
at
for.
what I
So
did
going back.
before. Like, yeah, right. Okay. That's awesome.
So
So
it took
having
me
that,
back to the roots.
mhm,
So
of
that's where like
course.
I was like, oh my God, that like the skills that you build upon like comes in handy one day.
Hmm.
I'm like, thank God.
It worked for me. It's the same. It's very similar. I mean, I didn't spend 5.5 years somewhere. I only spent the 2, but it was doing that type of work. And I fell into writing, macros in, like pretty much Excel, but then learning,
Mhm.
oh, I can mail merge, I can push things automatically into PowerPoints and save them. Then when I learned how to iterate through files and folders using like private and public subs, I was like, whoa, hold up. And then naturally I got scoped by information services group to do very much the same thing. So I totally get you literally just leaned into something, learned how to do it, and then was just like, oh, do you know this? And they literally, it was so funny. Their questions to me were the same. They were like, do you know how to problem solve? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm a process improvement analyst or consultant. Of course I do. Right. They're like, what technical chops do you have? And I explained the projects
Mhm.
and there you go. And I'm sure yours was probably similar, right?
Yeah, it was pretty much similar. Like they gave us like, they gave us a piece of code that we just had to like, solve. And like he just gave me like a pseudocode, and I just had
Sure.
to write a piece of code for it.
Sure.
So those kind of like little problems like really helped us. And I think
Hmm.
now lead code is more famous, like, like to
Yeah.
land a technical job. So
Hmm.
like you can like try to solve like some of those problems, and that will like get you like trained. I think like it kind of like, trains your brain in a certain way, just like
Yeah.
how
I
you
agree
work
with that.
out. So like if you like, have a goal and you don't hit that goal overnight. So like it takes time. Similarly, like I would say like even with tech, like try to train yourself to think in a certain way, like because like data structures and algorithms, or like even when it comes to like object oriented programming, like you have to like know the concepts. It gets embedded in you. So there's no way like
When you do it
like
enough,
yeah.
yeah. It's so wild you bring that up too, because there will be people even at UiPath, right, where they're like, "How do you know Studio so well?" And I'm like, all I do is live in this tool. Like I just demo my own stuff, I build my own stuff, and eventually I start to really, really dig deep into how do I play with those parameters? How do I edit certain functions? How do I learn how to write expressions that normally I would, like the easy way of like maybe I'll just like loop through a data table and then do like an if statement, but can I actually parse it out automatically? Like things like that. We're getting deep,
Yeah.
right? But like learning how to code that, you're right. It gets ingrained in your brain of like, oh, I know how to do this thing now. So to the technical consultant piece, which I want to kind of segue this into you becoming a most valuable professional at UiPath, is you clearly did that for a long time and you're 4 years running on this, which is awesome. Congratulations, by the way. I know you've worked hard for it. That type of skill led you to becoming an MVP. So you leaned pretty heavily into UiPath then at that point, right? Like this was kind of your tool of choice. And I mean, obviously you've made a career out of it. So because your work, you've done it. So like, what was it? Was it just that push and you fell into it and you leaned into it? Or was it more like you just took what you had and just decided to lean into the tool and that's what happened? I mean, I'm just curious to be like, because obviously that was the segue, right? Of the UiPath. Machina gives you the
Mhm.
opportunity. You do that. You guys are doing UiPath implementations and consulting and so on and so forth. Is that just what you ran with, or was there a bigger push?
So I would say, like, somewhat similar to your experience. So, like, you had that curiosity, like when you
Yeah.
said like you were left with studio, like you tried with different parameters. That's similar to what we did. So within machine
Okay.
automation, even though we had like projects and stuff, like if we don't put that effort, I don't think like I would have survived Machina, if that
Sure.
makes sense.
Sure. No, it
So,
does, especially if you're on the bench and you're like, hey, I got to learn this skill. Like, so I got a quick side note on that. Does Machina like actually push you through like any certifications, or is that really on your own?
So when I joined Machina, it was a startup. So like we were like barely like 4 or 5
Fair enough.
employees. So
Sure.
like
Okay.
back in that time, there was not a lot of push towards the certification. But we are talking like 2018, and back in
Mhm.
that time, even UiPath did not
I
have
mean,
like
we
a
had
lot of
just released
community.
it. Yeah.
So there was
Right.
barely like I want to say like 300 people on the community or so.
Right. Yeah,
And
there wasn't
like
much.
over
Yeah.
time, like over the next 2 years, like it just exponentially increased.
Oh,
So
yeah, because we came out of nowhere and just destroyed the whole screen scraping market, and people were like,
right.
"Whoa, this tool really works." And it's like, yeah, like, which is great to join at the time. But yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah. Okay.
So when we did that, like in Machina was like a partners with UiPath as a
Mhm.
training partner. So I did my certification to become a trainer
Yep.
initially, and then like we did the developer certification as well.
Mhm.
And believe me, back in the days, like UiPath certification operation was completely different. It was like a 3 hour proctored test
It
where I
it
had
was
like someone
wild.
from
Yep.
Romania literally
Yep.
watching my screen as I
Yeah.
coded. And I'm like, I don't do well when people are just watching,
And it's
staring
also
at.
too like I find that so funny that like we've evolved from that now, and I'm glad we have that it's more the written exam and you're practical and just getting a workflow to work is how you get the certification. I think it's a way better way. But at the time, it's just like it makes sense why you do it because we're trying to hold people accountable. Like if you're going to be a partner, right? You really, really got to know your stuff, which I think is a good almost like sidebar into if you're going to say you're like something on LinkedIn, you should probably have some creds to back it up,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's what's huge, and that's what you're saying here, and that's why we had the Romanians sitting there being like, "You should code it this way." Now, do you need to do it that way every time? Absolutely not. But at the time, it was the best thing we had, which I'm glad we did it that way. And then eventually, y'all yelled at us and said, "You should change this," and then we did. But it's just that's so funny that you dealt with that experience, man. You've been using it for so long. Wow, that's crazy to
Yeah.
me.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, now that I look back, it feels like again, like oh, every experience counts. In this
Hmm.
case, like I truly cherish that as a good
Of
memory
course.
because
Yeah.
like it truly like built me, like it forced me into becoming a great developer and then a
Hmm.
solution architect. Because
Yep.
like knowing that, like, like eventually I became friends with the guy that was like evaluating us. So
Oh yeah, of course. Like
gotta
once you're
learn
in,
from the
once you're part of the
startup.
club, we love you. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how like it was like truly like starting that relationship with the
Hmm.
community. Like I started like posting questions on the forums because
Hmm.
like once you start like going to consultants, like clients, and start looking at their problems, like I didn't know, like because like with .NET there's a lot of like information out there. I
Hmm.
can go to the library, get books, and like like find my
Yeah.
answers there, or like go to like Stack Overflow, or like even
Hmm.
the .NET documentation. But with UiPath being like in its infancy stage, I would say like the information was very limited. We didn't have the
At the
like
time, now it's not, but at the time it
documentation
was.
portal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so every time we would like post questions, somebody from the UiPath development team would be the one
Mm-hmm.
answering it.
Right.
So like for me it was like more challenging trying to learn the product. And just like in terms of the intricacies, because like I come from like a Visual Studio IDE. So for
Right.
me, like
Right.
the studio was like perfect, like it looks like a
Oh,
mirror.
it was seamless for you. You're like,
Yeah,
yeah, okay. Well, it also makes sense because if you look at the history of UiPath, the founders were from Microsoft. So like it was kind of like you get the idea. But yes, but I get what you mean. Yeah. So that from like the usability standpoint, it was seamless. But even then, I think it goes back to what you said. You had the foundation to be successful.
yeah,
So even though you didn't have all of the resources at your disposal, you still were able to navigate in the ways that you understood. And I think that's the key of what you kind of described, whether you recognize it or not. Like you persevered with what you had.
yeah.
And now you're helping curate something better because you are part of our community and you are a prominent member of our community that we like to highlight all the time. So it's kind of a kudos to you. I didn't plan on doing that, but you really hit on something there that's great. And a lot of people are like, how do I put myself in a better position? It's like you kind of gotta struggle a little bit, to be honest.
Initially, right?
Initially, yeah.
Only then like
Initially, yeah, if
you
you're struggling the
learn.
whole time, yeah, if you're struggling the whole time, drop it. But if you're struggling initially and then it starts to click, you're going to start getting more help because you're asking better questions, you're
Yeah.
driving towards better solutions and so on and so forth. So it's having that. I just want to drive that home like you've been saying it really through like really just between the lines. Have a foundation and it'll work. And that's really what your
Absolutely.
story is. Yeah.
Because that truly made me stronger, like having that foundational knowledge. Because when I go out to clients and being in like a startup consulting agency,
Mhm.
like like when you're presenting yourself, you've got to present yourself knowledgeable, because like you're
Yeah.
trying to bring a brand new
You don't
technology.
have a brand. Yeah, it's
And
just you,
you've got
right?
to be like like you've got to be that strong suit, like like holding the fort and saying like, hey, I know what I'm talking about. And like you've got to present the solution, so that like like, because they keep changing the problem statement and you've got to adapt to it. So
Oh, clients changing a problem statement? No way. That never happens for you. Come on.
yeah, right.
Change orders, scope creep. That's a thing. That's a lie. That's a buzz term. That's a buzzword, right? It's not a real thing. That's so funny.
So
So,
we've all been there, and that's how
mhm,
like like when you start, like when I started going out to different clients, and like not just me trying to solve just the client's problems. Then I noticed like, okay, I've got to like like to keep up with the learning. The forums really helped me, like with the
mhm.
UiPath. That's where like the
Helps me
community
too,
comes in.
still to this day. They
Even to
still
this
help
day,
me.
yeah. I used to spend like every day like 5 minutes. That was my start of the day. Like
Mhm.
every day, spend 5 minutes, answer a question, because like it might not be the same problem that I
It's like
had,
people on LinkedIn. Go comment for
right?
5. It's the same thing, guys. It's just a different Oh, I love this. This is awesome. This is great.
So I would say like, see, if you want to improve your knowledge in something, try to go to their community and see like what are the problems that people are facing. And like if it's already been solved, try to get to know the answer. And that way, like, you're building your knowledge base. It's not that like you've got to face the problem to find the answers.
Mhm.
It's just that like if someone else has the problem and you resolve it, you've got the answers to it. You're building your knowledge on that.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that's how you build a skill, basically.
Yeah, and it no, and it's so funny you bring that up too because it's, some people are like, how do I sell better? How do I, solve problems better? But you just said it is put yourself in the end consumer's position. Put yourself in their problem. Even if you don't solve it and even if the answer is already there, instead of saying, "Oh, that's the answer," why is it the answer?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're digging deeper into more of the why. And now, while I will say, especially in like automation, I don't think we need to value sell automation as much as we need to show how, right? And I think you would agree. But it's still more like if I don't understand their why, and I don't have a foundational understanding of how it actually works, how am I going to effectively solve any problem, especially with technology? So, like, that's what it just, I didn't even, oh my God, you're just teeing everything up perfectly to just like all of these things that people do, regardless of whether or not they want to be a developer, whether or not they want to go into sales engineering, solution architecture, just starting out, it's all the same. Like, I don't know. I just want to give you flowers for that because that was just a good track right there. I'm glad it's recorded because that's getting posted.
So when you
Yeah.
start like,
Mhm.
like spending your time like this, I would call like as an investment of my time, because
Yes.
like, like you can spend like 5 minutes at the water cooler chatting, or like you
Mhm.
can spend like 5 minutes at the forums like trying to solve someone else's problem, and like
Mhm.
that way you gain this knowledge, and like you can take it up, and like that truly like helped me evolve into the solution architect role. Because like
Mhm.
as the company grew, like as Machina was growing, like I was also mentoring like the new developers, sharing like what are the best practices
Yep.
and like the coding standards, and
Yep.
teaching them like, hey, this is the UI path world, this is how we do things, and like project organization, or like setup, or like
You're just ripping
infrastructure.
through foundations with them and just
Yeah.
making it your own. Yep, that's it. That's
So
it.
like we've got
Love
to
it.
we've got to like like add the flavor of Machina to it. So
Mhm.
that's where like it helped me, like when you start mentoring new people, and like you start like gaining their feedback, like you want to know like what did they think, so that way like like you get to know their perspective as well. So one thing that truly like my positive strength is that like I'm a good listener. So when like people try to tell me things, I try to like absorb it and like chew on the thought, and then like
Mhm.
come back and do the action. And like when I get up, like every time, like you've seen my tag that says Scrum Master, I did that certification as well. But like
Mhm.
every time you've got to have these, like these are ceremonious meetings, like every day they have these stand up, but like I want like actions out of it. Don't just like like not just talking
Yeah,
like
don't
at
just
the
be like, "This
status
could have been
update.
an email." It's like, "No, let's meet for a reason and have a good call to action." Which, hey, if you're in sales, you should probably have a call to action with most things you do. So, once again, tying it. Yes.
So that way, like like I'm more of like action oriented person, so
Mhm.
like I need like like what are we gonna do, like don't just come to me with complaints or like
Mhm.
problems, like we need to know like what are we gonna do about it. So
Mhm.
like because I've been in like tons of calls that are just like for the sake of like just discussing the
Oh, the sake
problem.
of just having one? Yeah, like, "Oh, we have to
Yeah.
have a meeting to discuss this problem." It's like, why didn't everyone think about the problem and provide solutions, like, prior to? Like, that would just make sense, right? Yeah, I get that.
So like I think like being a solution oriented person
Mhm.
really like helps us like move forward, so that like you take the baton and start running, so that like people will eventually like catch up, or like somebody will follow. And like like some people tend to stop and ask questions, which also is like really valid, because like
Mhm.
sometimes you've got to take a step back and say like, hey, you're too close to the problem, like probably like like try to look
Sometimes
at
that's
it from
true.
50,000 feet.
Yeah, and I've run into that a lot, and I think that's been a lot of the feedback that I've even gotten personally in my career is it was always and it was never said like that, I guess, it
Mhm.
was just like, "You're doing too much." I'm like, "What does that mean?" Like, I'm trying to throw myself at the problem, but sometimes because you're so intimately involved, it does make a lot of sense to get to the lowest common denominator and say, "Hey, if I can look at this almost from more of the 1,000-foot executive view, I think it'll help you push to another direction. It might not necessarily be exactly what you know is maybe the right thing based on what you had, but that's also shaped by your experience in the scenario and the situation. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes in those do have to extrapolate out, which I do want to tie into because I think we could go down this rabbit hole forever. But knowing nuance in a situation, you did become a mom, right? Which and how old's you have a boy, right? Baby boy?
Yes.
Yeah.
He just
How old's
turned
he now?
18 months now.
18
A
months?
year
Okay.
and
So
a half.
yes. Oh, so now you're starting to get the tantrum phase, like the real big tantrum phase and whatnot. Yes, I think you had
That's
said
what
prior
my
to this.
pediatrician said.
Yeah, go down for now. I get it too. I have a 1-year-old. So, but understanding nuance, understanding situations, you clearly understood I need to take some time for myself. And you actually, I believe you took a break. Now you're just doing part-time freelance work, and that's what you've been doing ever since. So, was it just the fact that you got pregnant and you decided, hey, this is what it's going to be? Did you communicate that with your husband? Like, what pushed you to actually taking that 1,000-foot view? Because knowing you, I know you always want to be involved and I know you want to be engaged and you always want to constantly be learning. So I feel like this is probably a little bit of a struggle for you to not be working all the time. So what'd you do in that situation? What were you personally feeling? I'm genuinely curious. And you don't have to go too deep in detail, but I'm just curious because
That's okay. I mean, like, I think this will help, like, other new moms, like, in the career, with their career running like 100 miles an hour, because
Mhm.
that's where I was. Like, I was feeling like my career is like taking off, and like, here's where I'm going to move. Like, I kept running, but then, like, it felt like, okay, stop, take a breath, and like, enjoy
Sure.
this moment. So that's what I felt
Yeah,
like.
I would say that to anyone.
And
Yeah, if you Yep.
when I got pregnant, I was thinking like, okay, I gave my 100% to the job, like, and I did like everything that I needed to do
Mhm.
to get to a certain position. and like to keep moving. And I know I will keep going for that, like in
Oh yeah,
whichever role, in
you're
whichever
still
job.
working. Like you're a
Yeah.
mom and you
So
still find time to do some stuff. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
I know like I was giving my 100%, but like when it comes to like my personal life, like when it came to a kid, so that's where I thought like, okay, I want to give this kid my 100% as well.
Yes.
And like it's a complete new perspective because like, like I've never been a mom, like
We
so
don't
it's
know
it's
anything. Like
it's just like
people will give you advice. People will say, do this, do that, blah,
do
blah,
that.
blah.
Yeah.
Intuition kicks in and you just do it because you're supposed to. And that's exactly, I completely agree with you. I love that. I love hearing that. That's awesome.
So I was like, okay, I need to like, take this time, enjoy the whole pregnancy and also my kid. So I decided, okay, I can get back into tech, into career like any time that I want.
Hmm.
But my kid is going to be little only during this period of time.
And it goes fast.
Right?
I know you remember coming home from the hospital. I know you remember it like it's yesterday. I do too. And now you just saw him. He's at the door, just walking around saying, "Hey, what's up?" And it's like, what happened to you? And they just grow up so fast. Ugh.
In
I
a
know we're
blink,
just.
it just goes by really fast. I mean,
Mhm.
like, but that's where like I want to stop and like savor every single moment,
Yes.
because like this is too precious to miss. And I know like career comes with like a good money and all that, but like I know I can earn money like whenever I want. Like like I can go back to my career like
Hmm.
once he's in school, because like after a certain age, like he's gonna have his own set of friends,
And
and
he's
he's
gonna have his
gonna
own
have his own set
routine.
of
Yep.
like his
Hmm.
own room, his own space. I don't know if I will be like inside in his inner circle, even though I'm his mom.
But
So
that's but that's
that's
but the
reality.
level of, yeah, it's the reality, and it's a level of, and I think it's awareness, and I think it's a good skill for people to have, whether they have kids or not. It's just more like self-awareness and understanding of, like we said, the situation. I know that he's probably gonna love me forever because, like, yes, Jenna's the primary caretaker, of course, but the minute I come out of the room, Daddy, hey, like, loves me, right? And of course, we always have the back and forth, and it's funny, but like, but I also do recognize there will be a point where he's like, I don't want to hang out with Daddy anymore. And that's okay. And I'm fine with that. But having that to understand, okay, well, then what am I going to do with my time? That's exactly what you're thinking about. You're thinking objectively. You're being an engineer about parenting. It's hilarious. I love it. But I completely resonate and completely agree. And I think it's a good skill for everyone listening to this, whether you have kids or not. I think it's that self awareness is key. I'm sure you'd agree.
That truly is like the reality when it comes to like kids. I would say like like I truly want to like give my 100% to him, and which is
I do
why
too.
like I want to be here in this initial years. And people always like like they always give me advice saying like, hey, you can do both. And even when I was like leaving Machina, there were people saying like, hey, you're like like really like running the show, like why don't you, like you can really manage, and you're a
Because
multi.
they're just like, we
I
need
know,
you.
like
And you're like,
you're
no, leave me
sad.
alone.
So it's easily said, but like I
Sure.
truly, this was by choice. This was my choice to say like, okay, I want like my family to be the priority.
Hmm.
And when I want to get back to work, I will. And like at that time, I'm
Yeah,
pretty
for sure.
sure my kid's gonna be in school, and like he's gonna have his own set of friends. And right now, like he's all, I mean, like for him, I'm his play date. I'm his like playmate.
Oh,
Like
yeah, you're everything
enjoying
now. Of
everything,
course.
literally
Yeah.
everything. So for him, like I've got to give him my 100%. So that's where like I'm coming from. Like he's gonna be little only for so long. I can carry him. I used to like he used to be only within my arm's length. Now
Oh
it's
man,
like
right? Like, and there's like
he's
this little
running.
tiny thing. Yeah, like, I'm like, I remember like now it's like when I hold him, if I don't have him secure, he's falling. Like it's a real thing because they're flailing and the whole. That's so funny. It's just it feels like all kids are like the same, but they're different because obviously they're your kids. Ugh, I love that. Well, I think this is a good time to, I guess, wrap up here a little bit. The final thing that I always ask the people, because I know you probably want to go, and I'm not sure if your husband was able to put your baby boy down. So I want to be able to get you back to that in case you need to go help. But in all seriousness, this has been an awesome conversation. I got a lot of insights from this. I'm sure a lot of people did. I know you enjoy it. I know you like to talk a little
I
bit too,
loved
and I
it.
let you run with
Yeah.
that, of course. But I think the one final thing I want to ask you, which is I ask all of my guests, is if people wanted to follow the Priya path, right? Not saying go deep into freaking object-oriented scripting and the whole nine, but they're trying to break into technology in some way, in the same way that you did. What's the one piece of advice that you would give people? I know you've already said it, and I know we've kind of summarized it, but just to kind of leave it as kind of the stamp of approval, so to speak. What's the one piece of advice that you would give people if they wanted to break into technology?
I would say like hold on to curiosity, because
Okay.
curiosity is one thing that'll like take you to places. Because like my curiosity is what led me to like learn a complete different technology. Even though
Mm-hmm.
like I had this .NET background, like I could have stayed with my comfort zone and said like I only want to be a .NET developer. I
And
only
some people
want to
do.
be within, and that's possible. So like I would say like start learning. Like when you have the curiosity, it helps you to learn. It helps you to grow. And when you learn, or even if you like like even if you reach a certain status, like in my case, even though I became an MVP, like I never stopped learning, because even today I have to learn to be able to grow.
I mean, yeah,
Otherwise I stay stagnated. So don't get stagnated with one glory. Like you've got to be like, to be growing, you've got to keep learning. So I would say
hmm
like keep learning. It doesn't matter like technology or like even like any skill in life, just keep learning.
I agree. I totally agree. I love that. And we're going to wrap on that because that is a great thing to end on. Stay curious. For everyone looking to break into technology, stay curious. There's something that piqued your interest about technology. If it was just the money, I'm sorry, you really got to work for that. But if it was something else, maybe you were exposed to a specific, like, cool little demo, or maybe you saw some really cool thing, go explore that. I completely agree. Priya, this has been a great conversation. I'm glad we finally got on the books. I literally, no joke, this is not a joke. We took like a month off from what we were
Yeah,
normally going to do to get here, but we're finally here. This is what parenting is like. Once again, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate what you do for UiPath. I appreciate you as a human. I can tell you're genuine. I can tell you're sincere. If people wanted to get in contact with you, is it easy for them to find you on LinkedIn and shoot you a DM about anything? Assuming not unsolicited stuff, but being like, hey, reach out, saw your podcast, wanted to, connect and ask a question. Is that totally cool to do?
absolutely. Yeah, you can post them my LinkedIn
Yeah,
link
for
or
sure. Yeah,
something.
we can do that. We
And
we usually put it out. We tag you in every post. Yeah. So
okay,
she's
yeah.
it's Priya Darshina G. If you search her up, that's what it is. For those of you who may be like me and ignorant to longer names, PRIYADARSHINI space G. You'll find her at still machine. I think you have machine automation is there, right? But you'll see it's
Okay.
4x at UiPath
Yeah.
MVP in the tagline. Feel free to shoot her. Otherwise, obviously, see the when this is posted and you can connect. Priya, once again, thank you so much for the
Thank
conversation. I
you for
really, really
having
appreciate
me.
it. Oh, no, this is great. You are, I try to do my best to find people who really are working in the technology sector well, right? People who are legitimately technology professionals or individuals who are supporting the technology sector very well, right? But all of us seem to have similar mindsets. We're very objective. We look at things the same. So you're corroborating that to the T. So once again, I know I've said thank you probably 8 times here, but the ninth one is thank you very much, Priya. And with that, this has been Priya. Anything last words you want to give us?
No, enjoy, have fun, and make learning fun. That's all I would say.
Awesome. Yeah, love that. I'm KJ, as part of KJ's Corner, as part of the Breaking Into Technology community. And we will talk to y'all later. Cheers, guys.
See ya.